You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Well, it's hump day, folks. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair, Mr. Michael Liebowitz, who also helms this magnificent station, otherwise known as the Rational Alternative. Got my partner back here who's running around a little bit chaotically. That's Ziggy, my wife's dog. He is a maniac, Michael. What's going on with the Rational Alternative? Anything new?
Well, either this afternoon or tomorrow, I'll be releasing an episode, an interview I did with a young man who's involved in the Liberty Movement, continuing my series on the state of the Liberty Movement. So that should be great. And of course, what you and I do here every day, bringing our insight and analysis to world events.
Great. Love the work you're doing. Super grateful. So, Michael, you sent me some disturbing stuff today.
You know, you always say that, but you didn't mention the super chats, the super stickers.
Hey, that's right. You know, we need super chats and super stickers. We also need you to share this channel liberally across all social media platforms, because we think this ideal of rational self-interest, this thing called capitalism, needs to become the dominant ethos out there in the world. And the only way that happens is through you. So please, like, subscribe, share, and super stickers and super chats are very much welcome. Did I say that okay, Michael? Do I have to make any more announcements before we get
No, that was great. That was fantastic. I just hope that everybody will subscribe to our channel. We're up to 928 subscribers, which is awesome.
Slowly,
and what was the other thing I wanted to tell you?
Michael,
become a member. Become a member of the channel. We've got great membership benefits as well. We do stuff on the weekends. It's all it's really great, and we're going places.
Also,
I'm going to get a haircut. I need a haircut.
What?
You know what I think too? Let me show you something. Hold on one second. I think that if I think these headphones cause a screwy thing with the background here.
Yeah.
I think if I were to get, I don't know, it won't come through the computer, your voice. So I think I'm going to get myself some earbuds maybe, so that they're down here, and then I don't have this thing that's impeding everything.
You're easily distracted, aren't you, Michael?
Well, I want to put on a high quality program, and I think that this stuff detracts from that.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'd like to get the audience's impression of that, because to me it doesn't bother me at all. Not in the least. And I also don't think you need a haircut. How can you tell that you need a haircut when your hair is about 1 millimeter long? When do you know?
Well, what we refer to this as is the Q-tip dynamic. When the head starts to appear like a Q-tip, it's time for a haircut.
So I did this movie called Prayer of the Roller Boys way back.
I thought you were going to say you did a movie called Q-tip.
Well, it relates to this. And in the movie, they bleached my hair white like Billy Idol, and I had it all spiked up. And my girlfriend at the time called me Mr. Tip, because I looked like a walking Q-tip. There you go. All right. Little piece of trivia for anybody out there who's interested. Let's move on, shall we, Michael? Don't forget to tip your waiters on the way out. Michael, you titled this first segment here, "Lying Commies." Tell me about that. Why are you accusing commies of lying? How dare you?
Well, there's this guy, Hassan Piker, who is claiming that Chairman Mao was wonderful. But I've experienced this in the past dealing with the jabronis over at the American Commie Party, where they try to rehabilitate Stalin, Lenin. And you'll find, and anybody that's ever done any research, I'm sure can find this too. If you want to have a viewpoint, you can find some guy out there, some historian or some academic who's going to support your view. And so that's what they've done. Though, those guys over there, they have people that say, no, the Holodomor really wasn't that bad. It really wasn't Stalin's fault. And no, communism's actually good and it's worked everywhere it's been tried, and, that sort of thing. So now you have this dickhead Piker who's out there saying that, Chairman Mao actually wasn't very bad. And this is just, it's utterly ridiculous. It goes with what we talked about yesterday with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher said, these democratic socialists, they're just really just commies. He said, look, I've read their platform stuff. So it makes me sick, to be honest, that in 2026, we still have to say that no, Chairman Mao actually wasn't a good guy. No, communism isn't actually a good thing. But here we are.
Michael, I hope I'm not like jumping a punchline here, but did you know that Chairman Mao ordered the elimination of sparrows?
I did, yes. Why don't you tell the story about the
So
sparrows?
this is how insane the commies are, guys. And one of the reasons I hate them so intensely. Apparently, Michael, according to Chairman Mao, the sparrows were a bourgeois bird. And they ate grain, and of course, grain needed to be harvested for the people. And so he got the bright idea to kill the entire population of sparrows. Unfortunately, what he didn't know, because commie science and all, is that sparrows did more than eat grain. They took care of pestilent insects, and they were a huge part of the ecosystem and the survival of the ecosystem, which nearly collapsed as a result of their annihilation of the sparrow population, which they then had to import from the Soviet Union in order to rehabilitate a part of their ruined ecology. Michael, it doesn't get any more cartoonish than that. That is just utterly ridiculous. The sparrow is a bourgeois bird. Come on.
Yeah, they actually referred to it as a bourgeois bird. So Mao starts off. Well, he didn't start off, but he was a Leninist, and this is this will get to kind of what we're going to talk about later too. So the commies and the nationalists, at times they're allies, at times they're enemies, depending what's going on, with whom they're at war, that type of thing. Mao kind of is both a nationalist and a commie. He early on when he comes to power, he wants to have sort of this, what do you call it? Let 1,000 flowers bloom or something. Everybody shares their opinion. Of course, later on when people are disagreeing with him, it's not so much. Now, you should be punished. And as things don't work out the way that he wants, because he wants to combine the socialism, communism, but do so with China, with, with, Chinese history, Chinese attitudes, Chinese culture. And he also says that there's going to be these contradictions. I hate the way commies talk with this, or Marxists anyways, the contradictions in reality and whatnot. But there's going to be these contradictions that are going to last even in socialism, that they're going to be there. But of course, the results aren't going very good. So they decide they're going to have the great leap forward, wherein they're going to industrialize rapidly. They're going to help the agriculture. Everything's going to go good. They need metal, so they're having people now melt down their metal household wares like pots and pans and stuff, so they can make furnaces. Of course, this whole thing ends up in famine. Millions and millions die. And I don't want to get into the arguments, because some people say, no, it wasn't actually 70 million. It was only 30. As if that's some great.
Oh, that makes it better,
great thing. Yeah, it's 30 million. It's the same thing with the Holocaust. I don't believe it was 6 million, maybe 3, whatever. So then he starts to lose favor within his own country. So now they need the cultural revolution, because there's too many people that oppose him, evidently. So more people die, more people are killed. Yeah, kill people who disagree with you, instigate famines, have policies that result in millions of deaths. But in Hassan Piker's mind, Mao is good. And I'm sure Mr. Piker can run around and he can find, some guy out there, that some historian that will say, well, Mao was well intentioned, he was really good. So let me just read to you what the Cultural Revolution was. It was Mao's campaign to purge bourgeois and counter-revolutionary elements from Chinese society and reassert his authority after the Great Leap's failure discredited him. There was mobilized youth, the Red Guards. These people attacked teachers, they attacked intellectuals, party officials, traditional culture, temples, art, and texts were destroyed. Millions publicly humiliated, tortured, in prison. Estimates of death range from hundreds of thousands to a few million. And education halted for years. A generation lost schooling.
Wow.
Now, here's the combined effects from the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward. Tens of millions dead between the two events. Chinese economy set back decades. Institutional knowledge and expertise in agriculture, science, and education were gutted. Social trauma, lasting distrust in institutions, and ultimately set the stage for Deng Xiaoping's post-Mao reforms in 78, because once Mao dies, they actually start to implement some market reforms. Of course, the jabronis over at the Communist Party of America will say, no, it's real communism is what's actually giving them the benefits. So, and Hassan Piker's with them.
You know what I find interesting about the democratic socialist movement and Mao is Mao was not, he didn't come from a poor family. He was born in the peasantry, but his father was a successful farmer and became quite successful and raised and so in essence he was in the upper echelons of the economic strata in China. And you notice this across the board, Michael. Mamdani, it came from wealthy immigrants. And when you think about this guy talking about colonial imperialism, well, he comes from a population of Indian migrants in Uganda that are 1% of the population and hold 60% of the wealth. He has a compound in Uganda, his family does, they're multimillionaires, that's fortified and protected by private security. And yet this guy has the balls to get up in the city of New York and try to institute socialist ideology, of course, that he's never really experienced on his own because he comes from a relatively wealthy background, as does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She comes from
a good background,
a bougie background. Yeah, no, they say
bougie background,
bougie. Yeah, I mean, she went to some pretty posh schools. I think she really grew up not in the Bronx. I think she was born in the Bronx, but she grew up I want to say Westchester. Is that right? There's some rather posh area up there in New York that was really where she lived, and where she grew up. And the latest failed candidates for the Democratic Socialists of America also came from bougie backgrounds. The guy that recently had to bow out, this guy's family is completely wealthy. They're multimillionaires. He went to posh schools. What is it, Michael, about this? And this happens across the board. Castro wasn't a peasant. Che Guevara wasn't a peasant. These guys, the one guy was a lawyer. The other guy was a doctor. They came from bougie backgrounds. And here they are pretending to be down with the worker class and initiating revolutions that destroy their countries and institute brutality across the land. Why can't people see them for the hypocrites they are, Michael?
I don't know. I'm actually, I've throughout my educational enterprises, I've always found time to stop and study a given thing. Like I studied the trade cycle for a while, or psychology for a while. And I think I'm reading Andy Bernstein's book, The Capitalist Manifesto. And when I'm done with that, I think I'm really going to do a deep dive into commies. So that I'm better equipped. I mean, I've read a lot of their stuff, but I'm really going to get into it because I don't know. there was a guy in an objectivist chat room the other day that said the moderates are the real people that need to be argued against. And there's always these sort of proclamations. I don't know if that's the right word, but we'll go with it. That, like, for instance, economic arguments don't matter. It's the moral arguments that matter. And people say this stuff as if they've got an abundance of evidence to back it up. So this guy, he says that the moderates are the problem. Now, that might be the case. I mean, sometimes you just don't have quantitative data. But when you don't, you ought not to speak as if you do. And I just don't buy it that we just need to battle with the moderates or fight the other, people who claim to be pro-capitalist. I think that Thomas Jefferson was right when he said eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And, communism has taken a beating, but a little time goes by and it resurfaces. And to think that, well, no, it's just, you just, ignore it. I think that's a big mistake.
Well, I do too, Michael, and it keeps resurfacing because altruism is still the dominant ethics of the land, and so long as altruism is the dominant ethics of the land, there are going to be people who are seeking out sacrificial systems, right? Because that's the moral ideal.
Do you think that's true?
I do.
I mean, my only point is that that's one of those things that I'm talking about. That's frequently said, and it's not that I'm saying it's wrong. I just think that what's the word I'm looking for? I think we need new material. I guess for lack of a better word, right? The constant like this is one of those things. We need to we need the moral arguments, not the economic arguments. That's one. Another one is it's the altruistic ethic. These are like sayings that people have adopted from Ayn Rand. And it's not that I'm saying they're wrong. I'm not. I just think that stuff kind of, what's the word here? That stuff resonates with people who already believe it. Right?
But people who don't, they don't understand what you're talking about, basically. It's more
they first of all, when you and I say altruism, for instance, we're speaking of it according to its original meaning when the term was created by Auguste Comte.
Right.
But most people don't use it that way. So most people think of altruism as benevolence or kindness. Sure. So when you say we need to fix the altruistic ethics, right? We need to get rid of the altruistic ethics. They're like, these people are against kindness.
True, right? True. I mean, but I'm speaking to the converted right here. So I don't know that I'd use that language if I were in mixed company.
Right. But I don't want to be, I guess Mark, all the time that we're on this show, just speaking to the converted. I'm having a real live conversation with you about how to communicate. I'll tell you, I feel kind of like I haven't even been posting to X or Facebook lately, other than posting clips and videos.
Yeah.
I don't have a fire in my belly because I don't want to just keep repeating the same things. I don't want to write the same old arguments. We have to come up with better ways of communicating the ideas that we're trying to get across. And this is a challenge that people have. I mean, it's funny. I've seen posts that were on Facebook from when I was in prison, and they're just, it's the same thing. Why can't we get other people to accept our ideas? Why aren't people adopting these ideas? And it's, altruism is too rampant. That's one of the answers. And again, it's not that I don't think it's accurate. I just think that we need to have better ways of communicating these things so that we bring people in.
I agree. James Valiant just said something that was on my mind as you were talking here. Of course, it says words like sacrifice and coercion are a better intro. I agree, because I was going to say to you, would you think it was more appropriate to say, so long as the ethics of sacrifice and that it's appropriate to use force in order to get to a moral ideal? I mean, like language like that, do you think that sums it up better? You don't seem to think so.
I think coercion is great. I think sacrifice has various meanings. And in the public mind, the minds of the individuals who make up the public, you say, for instance, sacrifice is a bad thing. What are you talking about? I had to sacrifice when I was young in
Right.
order
Yeah.
to, you know what I mean?
Indeed.
In order
Yeah.
to get ahead, I had to
Sure.
sacrifice. I had to work 12 hours a day, whatever, whatever,
I
whatever,
had to give
whatever.
up short-term pleasure for long-term gain, and they
Right.
consider
And
that
if you look up sacrifice, that's one of the meanings. Of course, what we mean when we're saying sacrifice is giving up a higher value for a lesser one, right?
right.
So that we're ending up worse off. So immolation may be a
I don't think anybody knows what that means, Michael.
well, sure,
We're
but I
talking
do
about
think
people who read at a sixth grade level now.
right. Well, so I do think that we do need to have a better vocabulary, a better means of communicating to your average person.
Yeah, so Thomas says, I think coercion is just as dicey. The left rails against coercion, sort of. I mean, they
Well,
rail
yes,
against
but you could
legitimate uses of coercion. In
right,
other
but
words,
you can demonstrate the hypocrisy there.
agreed. And I think when I address communists and socialists on social media, Michael, I often use the term coercion. I often use the idea of force and compelling associations with people, and would they agree with it under certain circumstances? And I try to make them understand it. But Michael, they don't. Okay. I had somebody from the Human Rights Commission, or it's a HRC. It's a group that I gave money to one time because they were working for gay marriage legislation in some state, and so I supported that narrow issue. And ever since, they tried to contact me for a time to support all their other communist and socialist issues. And I actually had a young girl, salesperson, on the phone, and when I discussed with her the rather bizarre contradictions in what she wanted, and I tried to say, I tried to explain to her, aren't you violating people's rights by trying to take their property and redistribute it to other people? She actually said property and rights are separate issues. And so they don't when you tell a socialist that they're using coercion and they're compelling people to accept their values, something they wouldn't accept if the right were doing it to them, they still don't understand the concept, Michael. And in some respects, because they think one of the government's legitimate functions is to use force to create what they consider to be a social justice, right? That equality between the classes and redistribution of wealth. They don't consider that force because it's achieving a moral end in their minds. So how do you, I mean, it is irrespective of its ends. The ends don't justify the means. But so how do you convince people like that who don't understand what coercion actually means?
Well, you can explain what coercion means because it literally has meaning. Jim says, and this, I don't know why Jim would say this, but Jim says there's no magical formula of words. Of course, there's not, but there are better and worse ways of communicating. And when you're communicating with a vocabulary and using words that are contrary to the meaning that your average person is using those terms, you're already up against it. Right? You're creating obstacles for yourself when you're trying to communicate. If you're using terms that the average person thinks mean one thing and you're using them to mean something else.
So certainly, like one of the things you do in your debates, Michael, which I really like, is define terms from the outset, so that you
Yes.
know that two people are on the same page. And I think if we were to use terms like altruism and sacrifice, then they have to be defined from the outset, so that the person that you're communicating with is on the same page and understand whereof what you speak, right?
Yes. So Captain Obvious, Mr. Valiant, says we have to address the substance of these ideas, whatever words you use. There's no evading explanation. But of course, Jim, nobody here said that we needed to evade explanation. We're talking about the words we use to communicate and whether those words are effective or not. Of course, you have to explain the ideas. That's vital. But words ought to be facilitators and not hindrances to conveying those ideas.
And a little bit unfortunate, Michael, because the concept of liberty needs explanation that goes beyond bumper stickers. But unfortunately, we've dumbed down the society to such a degree that they only understand bromides. They only understand slogans like "Make America Great Again," which can mean anything to anyone. They only understand hope and change, which can mean anything to anyone. Once you start getting down into the specifics of why a particular philosophy is good or bad, you start to lose people. So this is the problem that we have to explain a complex philosophy and its ethics to a people who are not equipped to connect the dots.
So Jim says words are not problems. Okay. So if I want to go see a magic show and I call my friend up and say, "Hey, I want to go check out this Prestidigitator that's coming down the street today."
Prestidigitator,
right? Would that be an effective way of communicating? And of course it wouldn't, because he's not likely, or she's not likely, to know what the hell I'm talking about.
I prestidigitated yesterday, just so you know.
I'll bet you did. But words matter. When we communicate with people, we communicate with words. Words represent concepts. Concepts matter. But if the word we're using doesn't convey to the person we're communicating the concept we wish to communicate, I don't know how that's not an obstacle. I don't know in what world that's not an obstacle. I just don't. If what I mean is people need to act in their own, people have a right to act in their own best interest, and it's moral for them to be reasonable in pursuing their own goals and their own happiness. But I use the word selfish, and to the person that I'm talking to, they think what I'm saying is that it's moral to run roughshod over the rights of other people and not consider their well-being, then that's an obstacle.
So you have to make sure you're on the same terms when you're talking about this stuff. James says, talk about Captain Obvious. Egoism in any language is still the main obstacle.
Nobody said it wasn't.
It's like
but nobody said it wasn't. But if what you're trying to convey by egoism is lost in a cacophony of misunderstandings, then it's all the more problematic. Hey, I mean, listen. If words don't matter, then how do we explain the great orators? How do you explain? Do you think it would have sounded better if Lincoln said, 87 years ago, is that better than 407 years ago?
Oh no, God, he was a great writer. No, you're right. It does matter, Michael, and there's a reason.
Of course, it matters.
People would come from miles around to listen to Daniel Webster when he would orate. They wanted to hear this stuff, and I wish we had men like that today, because wordsmiths they can change you, Michael. They can change you because they have the right combination of concepts that can really unlock parts of, really significant aspects of your mind. Rand did it, for crying out loud. You read some of Rand's essays and they're so perfectly formulated that they actually serve to unlock parts of your cognition. I mean, they're powerful things, words.
I don't, there's like this thing with a lot of objectivists, it seems to me, that they're like anathema they're so afraid of rationalism peeking in that they don't want to define terms. I don't get it, because in all my reading of Rand, she's constantly citing dictionaries. The dictionary definition of this, according to the dictionary this, according to the dictionary that. She talks about the strength of one's arguments falls, arises or falls based on one's definitions. In Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, there's a whole section on definitions. Words are vital. They're the first importance of words, of language, of concepts is in our own intellectual development, our own cognitive development in how we think and how we're connected to reality. But what we're talking about here is not your own understanding. We're talking about communicating them to other people.
And therein lies one of our primary issues, Michael. One of the things we're going to have to overcome, the obstacles that face us today. And I think we'll be able to do it. Hopefully.
So hold on. I just want to say, go ahead, Mark. You finish up.
Because it's not. This is unrelated. It's sort of unrelated. But so finish your concept, because I want to tie this up too.
Well, so Ian Gilmore says defining terms can lead into a rabbit hole of arguing about the definitions. That is the issue to look out for. Well, here's the problem, though. If you have different definitions of the person to whom you're communicating, then you're screwed regardless whether you go down that rabbit hole or not, because that person's not going to know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
Definitions identify the fundamental distinguishing characteristic of a concept.
Yes.
And if the person to whom you're speaking has a different idea of the fundamental differentiator of the concept you're trying to convey, you've got a problem on your hands.
I think you're saying something important for all of us to take in and to be cognizant of moving forward, Michael. So, I mean, earlier I was talking about how so many of these democratic socialists are bougie, right? They come from the bougie class and preach these concepts, these anti-bougie concepts. Does anybody in the chat know, or maybe you know, Michael, did Hassan Piker come from money? As we know, he's a multi-millionaire now because of his capitalistic exploitation of his socialist ideas, which have found popularity. But I want to know if he came from money. Does anybody know that?
I don't know anything about this guy. I've never listened to him. I wouldn't recognize his voice. I might not even recognize his face. I don't really.
Well, and he wore the Chairman Mao uniform when he was speaking before that audience. But before that, he wore like an off the rack, mismatched, suit. And I thought, this guy's cosplaying being a proletariat. He's cosplaying being down with the people when he's really a freaking multimillionaire who can go off to freaking Gaza on a relief tour with a bunch of self-righteous media whores in order to pretend like they're going to relieve Gaza from starvation when they're really just out there promoting their freaking brands. But it just was funny to see him in a bad fitting off the rack, like a combined top from one suit with the bottom of another, cosplaying as a proletariat. I have to know if this guy was born into bougie luxury or not. Bougie, I mean, and Michael, luxury. What is how is it so? Isn't it so ironic that these people are born into money, right? And they become socialists. You and I, born in relative poverty, lower middle class at the most, with very troubled backgrounds, but here we are promoting capitalism. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. Anyway, any final things to say about this monstrosity of communism?
Two people have told us now that Piker is Cenk Uyghur's nephew.
Oh, so there you go. So I'm assuming
the grift doesn't fall far from the tree.
The grift doesn't fall far from the tree, and I'm assuming that means there's money involved in that grift from the very early age. Man, Cenk he's like Jabba the Hutt to me, Mr. Toadman.
Oh, when he starts yelling and sweating, and
I know I'm going to say something, Michael, I probably shouldn't say, but
don't say it. Don't say it.
Okay, I won't say it. I won't say it. But everybody kind of knows where I'm going with what I think should be going on with Cenk Uyghur. Anyway, Michael, did you want to talk about Nicaragua? Because some crazy shite is going on there. Not that crazy shite hasn't been going on there for decades.
Well, it has. But I want to start at the end with Marco Rubio.
Okay, go ahead.
So Daniel Ortega, the leader of, or whatever he is, the president, I don't know, of Nicaragua, has said he's going to cancel elections. There will be no more elections over there because the subverters, the enemies, the jackwagons, whomever are going to take over. He's not going to let that happen. So Marco Rubio comes out and says that, what did I do there? Something not good. He comes out and says that he better not do that. And, the United States will not allow things that are, oppressing their people, going against our interests, whatever. And the first thing that comes to my mind is like, why, the United States government seems to just want to get involved in everything all over the world. It doesn't matter how much, we're in a war right now that we're not winning. We're trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. we're losing free speech over here. Not, totally. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but there are threats to free speech, and yet we're like, oh no, this guy in Latin America is going to cancel elections, and it's not as if we haven't had problems in this part of the world in the past. I didn't even know it. All I knew, I looked up. I wanted to know what is the history of foreign policy between us and Nicaragua. And I thought it was going to go back to 79, when the Sandinistas took over and then the Contras, and we'll get into that in a second. But no, this goes back to like the early 1900s. We're dicking around over there. We end up installing the Somoza regime, an oppressive regime. We basically buttress it, for a good 30, 40 years over there as it's oppressing its people. And then the Sandinistas come in and take over. And then we're going to go further and fund the Contras. And evidently we didn't learn from the Iran-Contra affair. But after all that, it's 2026, and guess who's in power? The same jackwagon who was in power when the Iran-Contra affair happened. But yes, Marco, please do threaten this guy. But let me just say, this guy fought for his beliefs over there. Say what you want about him. I think he's a scumbag commie, right? But nevertheless, fought for his beliefs, went to jail, was exiled to Cuba, then snuck back over to Nicaragua to fight the government that he wanted to fight. I just don't see him being intimidated by Marco Rubio saying the United States is not going to stand for, he's just, stop. Well, we don't need to be involved everywhere in the world. We just don't.
I agree with you, but it seems like Rubio's trying to play off, the seizure of Maduro and the economic crisis in Cuba that it threatens to collapse that government there and create a sort of new system. It looks like he's got some kind of power ambitions, Michael, with respect to all of Latin America. He wants to democratize them, maybe in the way that Wilson thought you could make the world safe for democracy. Well, a reinvigoration of the Monroe Doctrine could maybe make the Western Hemisphere safe for democracy. I mean, here we are. We become victims of policies of these megalomaniacal politicians. Unfortunately, yeah, we have no business in Nicaragua. Let them fall or rise on their own merits. They're not a threat to us in any way.
No, I mean, I'm just the whole Iran-Contra thing. We end up selling. They tell Reagan, no, you can't fund the Contras. He sells weapons to the Iranians again. Now the Iranians, who, by the way, this is after the whole Iran hostage thing, after the bombing of the barracks in Beirut, after we've been funding Saddam Hussein, but now we're going to sell weapons to the Iranians. That money somehow gets to the Contras. It's just, Jesus, let's just take a break and stop this idiocy. But then, this whole idea that you're going to prop up somebody like Somoza and the Somoza regime that oppresses its people, or the idea that you're going to back the Shah, or you're going to back Saddam Hussein, or the Saudis, or whomever, because they happen to be fighting against the people you don't like. In the short term, yes, it seems like a good idea because you beat an enemy. But in the long term, probably not. First of all, you lose your whatever moral high ground you have is gone when you do that.
Yeah, but Michael, this is the effect of pragmatist politics. I mean, this was the Cold War ethics that if the enemy of my enemy is my friend, irrespective of what their own moral orientation was. And that is how America lost its moral stature in the world. The politicians at the time were more interested in defeating the Soviet expansionism than they were in maintaining their own integrity in the eyes of the world. And now we won the war, more or less. We defeated Soviet expansionism to a degree, but we lost moral stature in the world. And those little fissures, those cracks in our moral foundation are precisely the things that the democratic socialists and the commies use to exploit. They exploit those cracks to sow chaos and confusion and disaffection with the system, and then they exploit that for political power.
Right. So speaking of hypocrisy. and and speaking
Oh, by the
of
way, before
dumb
you get
foreign
there,
policy,
I want to jump off. Some folks actually wrote about Piker's his origins here. Mohammed Bakhet Piker, a political scientist and economist who is a board member and vice president of the Turkish financial conglomerate Sabanki Holding, I guess. James also says Piker owns a $2.7 million house in LA. Dad is a corporate board of directors. Hello. I don't get it, Michael. I don't understand. Is it that these people are born into wealth and they don't understand that wealth comes by value creation because it's just handed to them, it falls in their lap? I mean, or do they feel guilty about having wealth effortlessly, and then because they think that they should sacrifice or they should do something for the common good, they then virtue signal these ideals out there in the world to make up for the fact that they're what is it?
I have no idea. I couldn't begin to tell you what's wrong with Cenk Uygur or Hassan Piker or Noah Krakarich or whatever the hell his name is, or Haz Al Dummy. I don't know. But Gary Menard says if Rubio was even vaguely passionate about freedoms, he wouldn't be in his current job. Oh, by the way, before I get to the hypocrisy stuff, man, I'm about a third of the way now through the second Lord of the Rings movie, the Two Towers. I love this Sam, man. This Sam is badass.
Right?
Yeah, Sam's badass.
He's gnarly.
Love Sam.
Love him, man.
Love Sam. So, little hypocrisy, not just hypocrisy, just downright stupidity. So we don't want the Iranians to be enriching uranium because we don't want Islamic fanatics to end up with nuclear weapons. That's understandable to me. Although I don't support the war, it's understandable to me that we'd want to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't understand is why we're on the cusp of allowing or agreeing that the Saudis can start enriching uranium. This whole enemy of my friend thing, or enemy of my enemy, what is my friend? Okay, this is still the birthplace of Wahhabism. This is still the place from which 15 and 19 hijackers came. It's still the land of madrasas. Right. And it's still the land where the king recently, in the last, 8 years or 10 years or so, had a journalist killed for criticizing him. But yeah, you want to enrich uranium? Go ahead. And they're assuring it's for peaceful purposes, of course. And I guess we're going to believe them. But they're not agreeing that they're going to have people coming in and inspecting to make sure. So we're going to take their word for it. And by the way, they've previously said if the Iranians get a bomb, an atomic bomb, they're going to get one too. What's to stop them from saying we have intelligence that the Iranians have it? We need it too. Like, this is just idiocy. It's hypocritical, and it makes us just look like unprincipled jabronis.
Which we've been looking like, Michael, for the past 70 years. Ever since we decided to be pragmatists in foreign policy. Yeah, and now, once Saudi Arabia gets it, the UAE is going to have to get it, Qatar is going to have to get it, everybody's going to have to get a nuclear weapon. And I think Saudi Arabia has signed a mutual defense pact with Pakistan. I mean, it's outrageous enough that Pakistan has a nuclear weapon, Michael, but that they've now signed an agreement of mutual defense with Saudi Arabia, the home of Wasabi's Islamic thought. I mean, this is terrifying, guys.
It's Wahhabism, not wasabi, Mark.
Wasabi is a green mustard that you put on your sushi. So forgive me. Wahhabism. Yeah.
It only goes on sushi?
Oh, you could probably eat it on other things. It's like a horseradishy thing. I'm sure it would go with other stuff.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Wait, I was going to say something and I got you. Anyway, I
side-railed you. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. This is a frightening prospect, Michael, and you're right. It comes from political pragmatism. The enemy of our enemy is our friend. This is not appropriate policy, guys. It's not, especially since, given the conflict with Iran, Michael, with Lebanon, with Israel, what you see is the Arabs holding back. They're sitting in the wings. They're pretending to play the peacemaker and the negotiator while expecting the United States to retaliate against any Iranian attack that comes on their soil, they're not really participating in anything because they're waiting to see who's left standing out of this whole shebang. And they don't want to offend the Iranians too much because the Iranians have shown that they're willing to, sacrifice entire populations to just survive. So they're just they were letting America pay the cost and Israel pay the cost and see what happens as a result of it. That should show that I think that should show the American diplomatic corps and the Trump administration that we don't have people there who are with us in good faith. They're not allies.
Speaking of Iran, I think you mentioned Iran. The beef is supposedly at Wendy's, Greg. So evidently there's a CIA report that has said that the bombings that are currently taking place are unlikely to result in a change in the Iranians' behavior. Trump, I guess, thinks it will. My question is, this is another situation where it seems that people believe the intelligence that supports what they want. Right. So when they say, yes, Iran is the number one state sponsor of terror, yes, they are. They're horrible. When they say Iran's not trying to pursue a nuclear weapon, I don't buy that. When they say that Iran has enriched uranium to 60%, oh, that's true. When they say Iran is unlikely to be deterred, no, I don't believe that. Personally, I'm skeptical of anything these people say because I don't know what their sources are. I wouldn't even know how to assess it, but they've been wrong plenty of times in the past. So I'm always skeptical, but I don't change my level of skepticism based on whether I happen to like the information. But that seems what Trump and numerous other folks do.
Yeah, Michael, they could keep bombing military ordnance for years and years and years and probably never get to the end, right? I mean, you're talking about an area the size of Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana or something, a huge land area with 90 million people there, lots of spaces to hide military ordnance. They could do this year after year after year and never come to the end of it. What he has to do, now I'm hearing people start to say this on public radio now and in some podcasts, he has to bomb dual use facilities. He has to bomb civilian power grids. He has to take out their oil capacity. He has to take out their capacity to trade with Russia or China. That is the way that you make the country truly feel the pinch of war. Will he do that? It doesn't seem like he's going to do it. It doesn't seem like he's going to do it. He's just going to continue this tit for tat thing. It's disproportionate. Yeah, they hit. If the Iranians throw a drone at a merchant vessel, they'll hit 90 targets. Okay, so what? So what? You're degrading their capacity by a fraction, and they'll still keep doing what they're doing.
Yes, Mark, you are correct. Did you like the article I sent you? By the way, we don't have. Maybe you can talk about.
I don't know if I've read it.
Oh my God.
What
the
is
one
it?
about price signals. Did you read the article
yes, I love
about
that
price
one.
signals?
That was
all right, we'll
fantastic.
talk about it. See, look at that. You thought you didn't read it. You caught you were what's the word I'm looking for here? Something short. Selling yourself short. You were selling yourself short. It turns out you read the article. I thought it was a good one. We got a couple minutes.
We should post that article, Michael, because I think
we should or I should.
You should post that article because it's really, 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 really good. People forget that prices are sort of a sum of knowledge. I mean, we talk about economy of concepts all the time in objectivism, and that's exactly what a price is. It literally distills millions upon millions of bits of information into one compact conceptual thing that everybody can grasp. And it takes dispersed knowledge and concentrates it into one piece of information that enables people to move forward, to understand in which direction they should allocate capital. And the state always tries to fuck with that, Michael. They always try to, it's as if they think prices are arbitrary. And when prices get too high, rather than let the market solve that problem, which it likely would if it were allowed to, politicians like to come and interfere with the price system. They hold prices down, which sends awful signals, poor information to suppliers, and we wind up with shortages and economic dislocations and supply line issues, all the things that happen when you cut off a flow of information from people who need it. Michael, do you have anything to say about it? Because it sucks.
Well, they pointed out that we're up to 928 subscribers. That great. Sri Lanka tried banning fertilizer and soon had all kinds of freaking problems.
Nitrogen, yeah, the artificial, the nitrogen right?
Yeah,
fertilizer.
So they ended up within months having to reinstate that. Wherever they try rent control, that ends up leading to shortages. But people just don't learn. Well, maybe some people, maybe the people. So there's this idea, and I can't remember the guy's name of it now, but who came up with the idea that the problem is that the benefits of these bad policies are really focused on a narrow, passionate group, whereas the costs are dispersed wide. Manker Olson, I think was the guy's name. It just came to me. And so, like the taxpayer, everybody's taxes go up just a little bit. And people don't really know, well, it's because of this that my taxes are up. But the people who are benefiting, they get to stay in their rent controlled apartment. They're loving it because, whoa, look at this. It's wonderful. I don't have to pay high rent. Or, the guy who keeps his job when the minimum wage goes up, he doesn't give a damn about the person that loses his job or all the people that don't get hired.
Right.
It's like you're selling
the fast yachts seen and unseen, Michael.
Good
in a way.
Point. Man, you are on target, man.
Okay. But it's true, and oftentimes
it's very true.
Oftentimes these these price controls benefit the very people that, they're not intended to, right, Michael? Like, I'll give you one example that I know of the rent control situation in New York. Actually benefited the famous actress Mia Farrow. She lived in a rent-controlled apartment. Michael, it was an 11-room apartment that she was renting for $2,200. An 11-room apartment for $2,000. How is that person incentivized to give up that property ever, right? That's something you're going to bequeath to everyone in your family. I know that when I lived in a rent control place, Michael, I gave it to my friend. I said, here, have this, keep it in the family, because I had a 2-bedroom place and I'd sunk a lot of money into it actually and fixed it up really nice. But I had a 2-bedroom place for only $800 in a neighborhood where 2-bedroom places were going for $2,500. You're not incentive. It creates shortages because you're incentivized to keep it within an insulated community of people because you don't want to lose that.
I love going to New York for the day. I cannot imagine ever wanting to live in such a place ever. I don't know why anybody would want to. People do all that horn honking.
Yeah.
No. If you take the light turns green, you haven't even had time to hit the gas yet, and someone's hitting the horn.
Yeah.
That's a pet peeve of mine, all this damn horn honking, because nobody knows who you're beeping at. You're beeping your horn and everybody's looking around. Is it me? Is it me?
Really?
I just assume not me.
Well, what I find interesting about New York is that crosswalks don't matter. And whatever the crosswalk says when you're at a crosswalk doesn't matter. So if it says don't walk, nobody pays attention to that.
No, and nobody pays attention when it says walk.
In fact,
they'll drive right through you.
Speaking of Mia Farrow, by the way, when she did Rosemary's Baby, there's a point at which she's running away from the witch coven. She's trying to get to her doctor. She's like 8.5, 9 months pregnant. Polanski did a scene with her where she runs across this big street in New York. I forget which street it was. And she's almost getting killed. Nobody on the street knew that it was a film. Mia Farrow running across the street is part of a scene. But she's nearly getting killed by cabs and cars that are honking at her and like nearly running her down. That's New York, baby. New York in 1968.
Yeah, you seem like you just really want to talk about Mia Farrow today.
No, I don't. It's just.
Have you heard about? Before we guys want to ask you, have you heard about this Courtney Stodden thing?
No.
Do you know who she is?
I don't.
I don't know much about her other than I've heard her name before, and there was a time when I would forget it, and then I would rack my brain trying to remember it because of the OCD. But anyway, so she was 16 and she marries this 51-year-old guy. Clearly creepy.
Really?
Yeah. So then I guess when she was 17, she's got this picture out there. It's all over Facebook and everywhere else. Well, just Facebook's the only place I've seen it, but I guess it's in some newspapers. And she's got a really nice figure, and her boobs are out. And Jason Alexander's there with a phone, and he says, "Well, your brain's not showing any signals, but your boobs are, or something." And she's now saying, "Well, I was only 17 years old. That was wrong, and he was wrong." But people are pointing out that, well, the one guy said, when I was 17, I went to fight in a war, and nobody blinked an eye. And somebody else points out that she's, even in her Facebook profile picture, her boobs are all out. They think that's kind of hypocritical. It's an interesting thing. I think it's clearly, what's the word I'm looking for here? Untoward of, a 50 some odd year old man like, Jason Alexander with a 17-year-old girl in an ad. But at the same time, I'm not all wound up about it. I don't know.
People are wound up about it now?
Oh, people are wound up on both ends.
Yeah.
Some people are calling her a narcissistic hypocrite, and other people are calling her a victim who was, the people that are, they say people who are criticizing her are just dirty old men who are out of touch.
I didn't even know this was a thing.
Oh, it's a thing. It's a thing, man.
Okay. There you go.
I just thought I'd run it by you. I've come across it a few times. I found it semi-interesting.
I haven't really been on social media that much lately, which is surprising even me, but I've just been busy. I've just been really busy. Normally, even when I'm really busy, I take the time to, be on social media because I'm in between shots or I'm bored. So but now I'm just sort of, once I get out of that groove, I'm happily out of the groove. And it's better that I'm not on social media because it's such a toxic world.
It is. So, now we can ask yesterday's question you asked about putting woke to bed, right? So as long as Rob Lincoln Heath said, as long as millions believe Israel is a genocidal state, woke lives on. And Greg Doherty says, discussing woke is wearisome. I'm in the drop it camp.
I agree. But the hatred for Israel is part of the woke agenda now. So you're right. It still lives on so long as that is part of the left's, agenda. And it looks like it is for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. Michael, who gives the capitalist thought of the day today?
You give the capitalist thought of the day.
Yeah, folks. Well, this article in the Daily Economy talked about prices as information, as a distilling of millions and millions and millions of pieces of information into one concept. And that's what the market is able to do. It's able to take all of the knowledge of millions and millions of people and make it accessible to all of us. No centralized economy has been able to do it. I don't think if a centralized economy were commanded by artificial intelligence, it would be able to do it. The only method by which all that information could be coalesced is the price system, which flourishes in a free economy. And a free economy means the government does not interfere with production. It does not interfere with free association. It does not interfere with exchange. All of that is up to us. But in order for that to happen, the political class and the people have to have confidence in their own ability to take care of themselves, which I think we're missing right now, Michael. People think that they need to be overseen by a paternal government, otherwise they will fall into oblivion. That's not the case. We at the American Capitalist Party have great confidence in the human spirit and your capacity to control your own life, and we think that the biggest part of human dignity is doing that, controlling your own life. And that's what you have with a capitalist society. Your life is yours and nobody else's.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I just saw Jason Alexander has actually apologized to Courtney Stodden now.
Who cares?
Well, I've talked about it, so I figured I should mention it. So my question is this: what do you think, for those of you who have seen Lord of the Rings, and please don't give away spoilers because I'm not even done with the second one yet, which is the best of the three movies? Is it The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, or The Return of the King? Please go to YouTube and answer the question.
All right, folks, you heard it. Please go to YouTube, answer that question. Please also share this channel across social media platforms. We think these ideas of capitalism, free market, and rational egoism need to get out there and become the dominant ethics of our society today. Help spread the word. Also, remember that the American Capitalist Party National Convention is coming up September 19th and 20th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Please be there if you want to influence the direction of the party and have a voice in the policies that we will be presenting to legislatures across the country. Please be there. It would be great to have you. As far as this show goes, the flagship show of the Rational Alternative, we will see you here tomorrow. You have 23 hours to check your premises. So do that, folks. Check your premises.